Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport. This was yet another busy weekend of motorsport with a couple of endurance races and some long ovals. You're doing well if you have time to watch all of this exciting racing. Championships are really starting to take shape now, so let's go through all the action from the past weekend, including World Endurance Championship from Sao Paulo, Indycar and Indy NXT from Iowa, IMSA from Motorsport, NASCAR from Pocono, Extreme E from Scotland, Formula Regional Europe from Mugello, Eurocup 3 and GB 3 from Zandvoort, British GT from Snetterton, and TCR UK from Croft. I'll go through the main talking points and my predictions from last week as always, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and let's jump into the video.
I don't know if this track favours anyone in particular, but I think Toyota's extra hypercar experience may help them on a track the hypercars haven't raced on before. So I'll save a number 7 Toyota ahead of 2 of the Porsche 963s, whichever Porsche.
We start with the biggest event of the weekend in my opinion, the World Endurance Championship and the 6 hours of Sao Paulo. For the first time the WEC has been to Brazil for a decade. We had a few early spinners but no major dramas at the start of the race. It was the championship leaders in both classes who hit trouble first. The Manthey Porsche had a couple of big moments and penalties, and the number 6 Porsche, leading the hypercar class, managed to hit one of the Jota Porsches and got a puncture. So far so good for Toyota, a trouble-free first hour and a 1-2 lead. Every car seemed to have minor issues here and there, but it was the leading Toyota that got a drive-through, but still managed to retake the lead, whilst Robert Kubica got turned around by the Proton Porsche. The number 7 Toyota was the class of the field, but a fuel issue dropped them to last of the hypercars. Iron Dames had also been leading, but a fluid leak and another retirement to add to the list of the yet another impressive drive. Last hour and Toyota looked like they were going to cruise to victory. Another mistake from Callum Ilott in 2024 cost the Hertz Jota team a decent point score. Kamui Kobayashi rolled back for years and pulled off an incredible pass to get back up to 4th. But it was the other Toyota taking the win with a minute in hand, ahead of the Porsches. It's the number 6 Porsche who keeps the championship lead, even extending it slightly, with 3 rounds to go.
Ferrari will have a shocker, and all 3 will be in the lower end of the top 10, or out of it completely.
It wasn't a complete disaster for Ferrari. They did okay, but I'm sure they'd have hoped to be more competitive.
Also, the best result yet for BMW. I think one of their cars will get in the top 5 for the first time.
Nope, both BMWs were not great. One did get into 9th place with a couple of points, but otherwise pretty poor.
And another top 10 finish for the Lamborghini team.
Yeah, they were 17th.
I am going to go for D-Station Aston Martin to take a shock win, ahead of one of the Porsche cars, and the Iron Dames, who just took a win in the European Le Mans Series. Team WRT and their 2 BMWs are also a threat, and they'll be 4th and 5th.
Same deal in the GT class. Another win from Manthey Porsche. That's 4 out of 5. And it looks like they are going to run away with the championship. But it's which Manthey Porsche will it be that wins? Manthey Porsche 1-2 in the GT class with only 3 rounds left.
Joseph Newgarden was the Oval Master last year, and it looks like that is still the case with a second Indy 500 in a row in the bag. I think he'll win another one at Iowa. Scott McLaughlin will take the other win, and Alex Palou will have a miserable weekend. 10th in race 1 and getting caught up in someone else's accident in race 2.
2 IndyCar oval races from Iowa. We had a crash on lap 1 with both Junko's Hollingers involved with David Malukas. Pretty disastrous for Junko's, who are pretty much done for the day. Christian Lundgaard also out. Joseph Newgarden started 22nd and had a lot of work to do. Work that looked very difficult, but he jumped up to 14th during the chaos. About a third of the way through we got a caution. Scott McLaughlin jumped to the lead and Alex Palou stalled in the pits, dropping to 19th. Later on he spinned, crashed and ruined Colton Herta's race in the process. Save of the season has to go to Herta for not crashing from this angle. Just a shame he couldn't save his race. Pietro Fittipaldi and Ed Carpenter couldn't be saved either. They collided with only 20 left. Will Power nudging Fittipaldi after misjudging the restart, a rare mistake from the veteran. So we had a 13-lap sprint to end the first IndyCar race of the weekend. The Kiwi held on and took his first oval win from Pato O'Ward, and an incredible drive from Newgarden to rise from 22nd to 3rd. Great drives as well from Rinus VeeKay, Santino Ferrucci, Stingray Robb, and Nolan Siegel, just for surviving. Makes the championship interesting as well because Will Power and Alex Palou, the title contenders, did not have a great race. Could they do better in race 2? Scott McLaughlin led the first 100 laps, but Alex Palou jumped to the lead when a fortuitous yellow came out for Agustin Canapino. Palou held the lead for 100 laps and then Will Power jumped him at the pit stops and took his first oval win for 5 years. Dull race. Honestly, modern technology has rendered ovals largely pointless, and the fact they've stacked the end of the season with pretty much all ovals is really disappointing on IndyCar's part. We got a last lap massive shunt that saw Stingray Rob on his roof. He was taken to hospital but is apparently fine. At the end of all that, not much has changed. Alex Palou is still leading the championship with maybe 5 or 6 behind, still truly in contention. Next week we are at Toronto, back on the streets, thankfully.
To the best of my knowledge, Lewis Foster has never won on an oval, and I feel the championship might be stacked against him. As I guess, I'd say the Americans have more experience on oval tracks, at least in testing, if not oval races. This could be a chance for Jacob Abel to wrestle back the championship lead. But I think Miles Rowe will win in Iowa. He had a good start to the year, but everything's kind of gone to pot in the last few races. A win in Iowa will get his career back on track, and he'll be a championship contender in 2025.
Indy NXT and their first oval race of the year from Iowa. A lot of drivers without oval experience, advantage to the ones that do. My pick was Miles Rowe, but he dropped to last because something happened before the start. So, great luck for me and him as always. He started to fly through the field, but Caio Collet spun in front of him and took them both out of the race. We had a long safety car and not a lot of racing. When James Miller crashed with 2 left, that was that. Another win for Lewis Foster, and with title contenders Abel and Collet hitting trouble, he has a commanding lead with 4 to go. Not much racing in Iowa, so it seems harsh to call it a bad race. It went by very quickly and has massive implications for the championship. Lewis Foster has pretty much got it in hand, especially as he can clearly handle himself on the ovals as well as on the track.
So, into Europole of Tom Dillman and Nick Boll will win the LMP2 class, the Corvette of Antonio Garcia and Alexander Sims in the GTD Pro class, and the Forte Racing Lamborghini, driven by Misha Goikberg and Loris Spinelli, will win in the normal GTD class.
IMSA from Motorsport in Canada, only the LMP2s, GTD Pro and GTD cars in attendance, no hypercars this weekend. The number 20 high-class racing car had an interesting start, crashing through some advertising, getting a penalty for a damaged headlight, and then crashing again anyway. This was all in the first half hour. We got another yellow when one of the Corvettes got nudged into the wall, so the first hour was broken up by several yellows. After that, the race was almost incident-free for the remaining couple of hours. Tom Dillman led for into Europole, but he was being challenged. 20 minutes left and the Aero Motorsport car ended up in the barrier. It didn't stop Tom Dillman taking the win, as well as the Corvette of Sims and Garcia, both of which I called. Okay race, but suffered because there was so much motorsport already and no hypercars. Honestly, I don't think LMP2 is a strong enough class of sports car racing to carry a whole series anymore.
NASCAR is at Pocono. Denny Hamlin is a god here. He's taken 5 wins, including last year's race. More wins at Pocono than anyone. But I'm going for Martin Truex Jr. because surely he's got to win at some point.
We end our time in America as we often do with NASCAR from Pocono. I watched this last, so maybe it was oval fatigue, but this was really boring. Some chaos in the final stage of the race. Ryan Blaney took the win from Pocono master Denny Hamlin. It doesn't change anything, but we only have 5 races left to the start of the playoffs.
He'll win again here on day 1, and Eon Veloce Racing with Kevin Hansen and Molly Taylor will win round 2.
Extreme E returned to our screens for the first time in 6 months. I can barely remember what happened in January. This time they were in Scotland for the Hydro X Prix. 2 rounds this weekend. If I remember last time they were here, mud was a massive issue, and it's good to know they're consistent because a quarry in Dumfries just happens to be muddy all year round. It didn't take long for the first shunt of the weekend. Timo Scheider hit just about everyone in the first qualifying heat as he took the lead. It was an interesting first race. Backerud ended up in a ditch and out of the race, but it was Clara Anderson who took the spotlight, rolling over the finishing line in first place, wrecking the car, and after a penalty, dropping to second. Talk about being kicked whilst you're down, or karma, depending on your point of view. The second heat was never going to be as exciting as that. Michaela Arlene Kotlinski made a couple of mistakes for RXR, hampering Johan Kristofferson's efforts later. As it turned out, that was the least of their worries. Easy win for Andretti. Gutierrez did well to hold off McConnell for as long as she did with a puncture, but she had a penalty anyway. So that was the first qualifying heat. The second heat started with Kevin Hansen and Andreas Backwood making contact several times. Hansen and Taylor won again despite a penalty, whilst RXR won their heat with ease. JBXE and McLaughlin retired from the redemption race before the switch, so it was a two-car race to the finish, a race that was won by Legacy Motor Club. On to the final, more problems for RXR, broken suspension ended their run at the start, otherwise, pretty typical final. Andretti made contact with Acciona Sainz a couple of times, but they both survived. A win for Kevin Hansen and Molly Taylor, and they take the championship lead going into day 2. The mud was a much bigger deal, visibility was poor, and a couple of flags bit the dust in the first heat, whilst RXR won the second heat after a penalty for Acciona Sainz. Veloce managed to get at least 3 flags dropped, so the championship leaders looked like they were going to miss out on the final. Acciona won their heat, and with penalties applied afterwards to others, it meant Veloce would make it to the final. RXR won theirs, with JBXE making it easier by rolling at the first corner, and McLaren by imploding. Not only did Ekstrom hit a flag, but they then released McLaren into the path of the RXR in the switch zone, which RXR were initially punished for, but someone decided to find some common sense and overturn it. It was the usual bunch in both of the final races of the weekend. Redemption race wasn't anything interesting, so the final, RXR had more issues and another win for Veloce. Andretti hit a couple of flags. It was a mixed weekend for Extreme E. Some of the racing was okay, but far too many penalties, and the finals are starting to look very similar. It feels like the series is in a holding pattern until something better comes along.
James Wharton got to make his Formula 3 debut at Silverstone, and with that experience behind him, he'll come back to Formula Regional Europe and take his first win. Positive experiences lead to a positive mindset. I think, and admittedly kinda hope, Tuukka Tarpinen takes the other win, as that pulls him closer to Rafael Kamara in the championship race.
Formula Regional Europe from Mugello. Tuukka Tarpinen led from a very impressive Brando Badoer. I think Ferrari should sign him up considering their long association with the Badoer name, but he is also looking very promising. We got a safety car for Giovanni Mascio, no relation to Ralph. After the safety car, there were very few overtakes and it was a bit of a dull race. Tuukka Tarpinen won, whilst Rafael Kamara laboured to a 5th place. Championship on. I've said a lot about Ugo Chukwu. The McLaren-backed Prema driver had another bad race, dropping out of the top 10 and not really showing any pace at all. Formula Regional Europe is really chewing up his reputation. James Wharton led from Brando Badoer and Rafael Kamara, with Tarpinen in 5th. Tarpinen seems to have Kamara rattled right now, and he gave it a good go at the end of the race, but James Wharton was untroubled as he took his first win, ahead of Badoer, who finished 2nd for the 5th race in a row. Kamara was dropped to 5th, so Tarpinen closes even more, with 5 rounds left. Also, I called both of these winners, by the way. It's about time I started to get something right.
Christian Ho took the championship lead, but Javier Seguera will take it back with a win in race 1, and a first win in the series for Valentin Kloos in race 2.
Eurocup 3 was coming off a tremendously dull couple of races at Paul Ricard. Javier Seguera led away from the start, but sadly, we got an early red flag after a massive crash between Michael Shin and Alexander Abkazava. Michael Shin barrel rolled at least a half dozen times. The race did restart, but it was starting to rain and the track was damp. Luciano Morano spun before the race even got going again. Javier Seguera led the field away with 7 minutes plus a lap left to play, but the safety car came back and we finished under yellows. Not a lot of racing, but the main thing is Michael Shin and Alexander Abkazava are okay. We still had the second Eurocup race. Alexander Abkazava crashed again, but not anywhere near as dramatically. Javier Seguera won again. Valentin Kloos did manage 3rd, but Seguera now has a strong lead in the championship.
Timit Kaharczyk had a disastrous couple of races at Hungary, and he's going to bounce back big time with 2 wins here in the Netherlands. We'll go for another new winner in the reverse grid race, German Hugo Schwarz. Why not?
GB3 was having its final European round at Zandvoort, and wouldn't you know it, it was a little bit damp. John Bennett was on pole, but he had issues even before the start. Good racing in difficult conditions. Lewis Sharp dropped behind Will McIntyre and Mackenzie Cresswell, but both ran off the track and gave those positions up. Unfortunately, with 5 laps to go, we had our first proper off. Patrick Hosenroder brought out the safety car, John Bennett won the race, and he and Timit Kaharczyk were back in championship contention. Race 2 started with a crash and a red flag. Most importantly, we lost title contender Will McIntyre. Not long after the restart, we lost championship leader Lewis Sharp as well. That meant with all his title rivals out of the points, Timit Kaharczyk cruised to the win and the championship lead. Race 3 was great, plenty of overtaking, a few cars going off towards the end, and a late safety car. Nikita Johnson won for the first time in GB3, but it was for title contenders going backwards and forwards that provided for most entertainment here. Timothy Kaharczyk took back the championship lead after Lewis Sharp had a very average weekend, and there's only 3 rounds left.
Tom Gamble and Mark Radcliffe in the Optimum McLaren will win race 1, and if they can get 2 good results from Snetterton, then they could have an outside chance of the championship. But Rob and Ricky Collard will win race 2, and they'll have the lead as we go into the final couple of rounds.
British GT with 2 races from Snetterton and only a few races left in this series as well, so the championship is really starting to take shape and it's very close. Before race 1, 5 points separated the top 3. Barwell Lamborghini led 1-2 for the majority of the race. The lead switched halfway and Sandy Mitchell and Alex Martin took the win. The second race was even less interesting than the first, and Barwell Lamborghini led the majority of that race. We did get a safety car with less than 20 minutes left. Sadly, we only had 5 minutes of racing, and even a late Rob Collard charge and a Tedesco crash couldn't stop Alex Martin and Sandy Mitchell taking a second win of the weekend, and the initiative in the championship. Except they were dropped to the back of the field, so Kevin Zay and Max Gotzer in the Mercedes won the race, and the Collard family Lamborghini now leads the championship with just 2 to go.
But Joe Marshall will take his first win in race 1, Adam Shepherd will win race 2, and Callum Newton will win race 3. Carl Boardley will be on the podium in all 3 races, and he and Shepherd will continue to pull away from the rest of the field.
I don't know what was happening in the world of TCR UK, but I got these predictions wrong, solely because Joe Marshall wasn't at Croft and Adam Shepherd was having issues. I don't know if it's a budget thing, but it gave Callum Newsham and Carl Boardley a big shot in the arm for the championship. Callum Newsham took full advantage in race 1. It was very wet and Brad Hutchison led until a brave move from Newsham gave him the win. Sunday was even wetter. Stuart Lyons was supposed to be on pole, but he pulled his Hyundai into the pits before the start. It was all about the top 4 and there was some good racing. Brad Hutchison was quick and was closing on leader Carl Boardley on the last lap, but went off giving Boardley the win. Adam Shepherd was there, but he was having issues with his car still, possibly costing him the championship with others scoring so many points over him. He would have a chance in race 3, although Bradley Fulwell would not. He brought out a safety car early on. This was the least interesting of the races. Callum Newsham won again and he was definitely the big winner of the weekend, with Adam Shepherd having issues and no Joe Marshall. So that was all the action from the past weekend. I did fairly well in my predictions from Friday, at least half a dozen right. My race of the weekend was the World Endurance race from Sao Paulo, but Extreme E was somewhat fun and the third GB3 race was also pretty good. Let me know your favourite race in the comments below. I feel like I may have been too harsh on NASCAR and IndyCar, but there was just too much oval racing this weekend for my liking. Next weekend, Formula 1 returns to our screens for the Hungaroring, with Formula 2 and 3 in tow. We also have the final rounds of Formula E, more IndyCar from Toronto, World Rally from Latvia, Super Formula from Fuji, Formula Regional Europe and Euro Formula from Paul Ricard, NASCAR from Indianapolis, Supercars from Sydney, and TCR World Tour from Sao Paulo. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss predictions on Friday, F1 review on Sunday, plenty of Formula E chat and more. Thank you very much for watching and have a good one.